Shabbat Shalom, Abanawa Shabbat Shemaim, Kodash, Aya Shumka, Yahweh, Malakwithka, Taba'a, Madazaka, Aya, Isha, Ba'arataza, Kawa, Aya Bashemaim, Matalinawa, Lakhom, Kul, Yawom, Masalakhlanawa, Kabawafnawa, Kasalachnawa, Kabawafiyanawa, Wala'a, Tabiyanawa, Vanasa Yawan, Abul, Ayashonanawa, Mayan, Rai, Kaya, Lakak, Amalakwat, Waha'ala, Wa'atap Haraf, Lawayamnam, Aman. All right, Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Ephraim. Today's date is February 4th, 2023. To all my new subscribers and older alike, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and select all. That way you'll be notified every time I upload a new presentation. Welcome you all to another Shabbat sermon. I've had a lot of questions and I've seen a lot of conversations going about this particular subject and how the Bible defines marriage, because there's no marriage licenses obviously in the Bible. So we're going to get into that. And so I want to thank you all for your continued support. Please continue to like the videos, share them, and comment, and I'll do the same and engage as much as possible. All right, let's get into it. Today in this lesson, what we're going to tackle, something I've been really wanting to deal with for a while now, and it is the biblical definition of marriage, right? Like, there's so many different scriptures we're going to go over today, and we're going to try to figure it out. Now, I had my theory for a while, but then the more I studied, the more that theory just kind of like, nah, that can't be it either, or whatever. But you know, we're gonna talk about it, and we're gonna figure it out. But before we even get knee deep into the main meat of the lesson today in the biblical definition of marriage, I want to deal with the elephant in the room. And I wouldn't say elephant in the room, but it's a question that many people have had, even myself. And I said, you know what, I need to find out the answer to this question. And the question is, where in the heck did the wedding vows come from? Okay, because I mean, people stick to those vows like the Most High Himself gave it to us or whatever. But wedding vows are nowhere near in the Bible. You won't find it, right? And I always knew that. But no one knew where it came from. You have people literally dying behind those vows, thinking it's a God thing. Now, maybe the spirit might be in that kind of realm or whatever, but you can't speak to the spirit of a man or the mind of a man. And one thing I've always held is that I didn't know who wrote it or where it came from, but I knew it came from a man, and I was right. So we're going to deal with that real quick before we get into the lesson. Who authored the wedding vows? Where did it come from? How did we get it? And when I tell y'all this story about this, y'all going to like, wow, I mean, what happened to this person and who this person was? So let's get into that. Who was the originator of the wedding vows as we know it today? So after today, it will no longer be a mystery. And now you all listening to this can tell people where wedding vows came from, right? And so spread the love and share the video, to all your social media sites and stuff, and embed it, each one teach one, right? But this is the man right here who was responsible for the wedding vows as we know it. His name was Thomas Cranmer, and he was an archbishop from the Church of England. And it says his diocese was Canterbury. Okay, so he was, for all intents and purposes, he was a man of God, right? And where those vows came from, it came from this. It's a book of prayers that he's the author of, and it's called the 1549, the Book of Common Prayer, by him, Thomas Cranmer. Now you would think that was, to this day he included something, and I'm gonna actually read the vows from this actually printed in the book, and it's coming up here in a minute. But I need to speak on this real quick. He gave us, and I say us collectively, as a society, as a culture. I mean, really all over the world, people recite these wedding vows, right? He gave us something this really held in the highest regard today. I mean, and for a long time, because you got to figure 1500s was a very long time ago. I mean, we're going to get into, his history a bit. I'm not going to get too much, but I'm going to tell you who he was and what happened to this man. Y'all going to be like, what? But if you want to dig deeper, I always, recommend to do your own research, but I give the highlights, right? And so we're going to talk about his I'm going to give you a little bio on who he was, but he gave us something that was very, just to this day is just highly regarded, right? And so here is the actual one of the vows that's actually in that book, the 1549, the Book of Common Prayer. And it says, "Wilt thou have this woman to thy wedded wife, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Wilt thou love her, comfort her, honor, and keep her in sickness and in health? And forsaking all others," well, actually, he didn't say forsaking all others, "keep thee only to her, so long as you both shall live." And then he says, the man shall answer, "I will," right? And then he says right here, "Then shall the priest say to the woman, Wilt thou have this man to thy wedded husband, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Wilt thou obey him and serve him, love, honor, and keep him in sickness and in health? And forsaking all others, keep thee only to him, so as long as you both shall live." And the woman shall answer, "I will." Man, when I read this, I was like, man, finally, I know where freaking wedding vows come from, because no one seemed to know. And I'm like, you know what? I'm tired of not knowing. I'm going to research it, right? And when I stumbled on, and I say stumble, when I found this, I was like, wow. I mean, it's just like I couldn't stop just cheesing, grinning. And, of course, here's the, hold on, sorry, but I had to bring it up in a bigger setting. I couldn't read that. I don't know if you guys can either, but the second part of it is located in that book, the 1549 Book of Common Prayer. And it goes, he says, "Then shall the minister say, Who giveth this woman to be married to this man? And the minister, receiving the woman at her father or friends' hands, shall cause the man to take the woman by the right hand, and so either to give their truth or troth to other." I don't know what that's old English right there. "The man first saying, Take thee to my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer." Man, this was written in 1500s, man. Wow. "For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do us depart," it says, "according to God's holy ordinance." Boy, the old English was, wow. "According to God's holy ordinance, and thereto I plight thee my troth. Then shall they loose their hands, and the woman taking again the man by the right hand shall say, I take thee to my wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love, cherish, etc., etc." I'm not going to read the whole thing. And then, this is the part that tripped me out. The very last line, it says, "With this ring I thee wed, right? This gold and silver I thee give, with my body I thee worship, and with all my worldly goods I thee endow, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen." Man, old English spelling was horrific. Wow, they spelled ghost G-O-S-T-E back then. But anyway, there it is, my people. Those are your wedding vows, and that's where it came from, and that is the author of the wedding vows as we know it to this day, obtained in this book, 1549, the Book of Common Prayer, right? So now I have to give a brief bio on Mr. Cranmer, because it's only fitting. He blessed us with something like that. And like I said, I mean, you read those vows. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, sounds good to me, right? But he had a lot of detractors. So before I even start going on that, let's get into to his bio a little bit. I'm gonna give you a little briefing on who he was and what happened to him. more importantly, because I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? You got to be kidding me, man. Like, wow. Okay. I'm not sure if you all can read that, but I'm going to read it. Probably won't do the whole thing, but here's a brief bio on Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. So Thomas Cranmer was born July 2nd, 1489, and he died March 21st, 1556. He was the leader of the English Reformation and Archbishop of Canterbury during the reigns of Henry VIII, Edward VI, and for a short time, Mary I. He helped build the case for the annulment of Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, which was one of the causes of the separation of the English Church from union with the Holy See. Along with Thomas Cromwell, he supported the principle of royal supremacy, in which the king was considered sovereign over the church within his realm. During Cranmer's tenure as Archbishop of Canterbury, he was responsible for establishing the first doctrinal and liturgical structures of the Reformed Church of England under Henry's rule. Cranmer did not make any radical changes in the church due to power struggles between religious conservatives and reformers. He published the first officially authorized vernacular service, the Exhortation of Litany. When Henry came to the throne, Cranmer was able to promote major reforms. He wrote and compiled the first two editions of the Book of Common Prayer, which I just went over in the last segments, a complete liturgy for the English Church. With the assistance of several continental reformers to whom he gave refuge, he changed doctrine or discipline in areas such as the Eucharist, clerical celibacy, the role of images in places of worship, and the veneration of saints. Cranmer promulgated the new doctrines through the prayer book, the homilies, and other publications. After the accession of the Catholic Mary I, Cranmer was put on trial for treason and heresy, imprisoned for over 2 years, and under pressure from church authorities, he made several recantations and apparently reconciled himself with the Catholic Church. While this would have normally absolved him, Mary wanted him executed. And on the day of his execution, which was March 21st, 1556, he withdrew his recantations to die a heretic to the Catholics and a martyr for the principles of the English Reformation. Can y'all believe that, man? This man was executed because they said a lot of some of his teachings was heresy. And I think just Mary I just didn't like him, or whatever the case may be. He was an archbishop of the church. So the man that gave us our wedding vows today was put to death, and he died in shame. I could not believe that. I'm serious. That's a horrible punchline for what happened to this person. I don't think it was deserved. Not at all, man. Not at all. Then it goes on to say his death was immortalized in Fox's Book of Martyrs, and his legacy lives on within the Church of England through the Book of Common Prayer, 1549, and 39 articles, an Anglican statement of faith derived from his work. So I had to share that, man. I had to share, it's more to it than that, but that's the basics of his bio, who he was, his position with the Church of England, and what happened to him. I mean, I was not expecting to read that this man was put to death. I was not expecting that. But anyway, I hope the Most High have mercy on his soul, man. I mean, because to this day, those wedding vows are recited by, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. Like, I don't even know, every day, every week, whatever. But and from his hands to our ears, eyes and mouth. So, may the Most High have mercy on his soul. All right, so on to the main meat of the segment. What is the Bible? How does the Bible define marriage? Not an easy topic at all, but let's get into it. Let's tackle it together. So I figured to kind of put the definition of marriage, the biblical definition of marriage, more in context, I wanted to start with the actual what the Most High says about divorce, because in this he's very explicit that there's a divorce decree, which is what it's actually called. Today, if you want to get a dissolution of your marriage or get a divorce, it's called, you have to file what they call a divorce decree, and the judge has to rule on it, whatever case may be, and then you're divorced. Well, it's not exactly like that, but let's go over it. It says, when a man have taken it, this is the Most High, when a man have taken a wife and married to her, and it comes to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement and give it to her in her hand and send her out of the house. Now, let's stop right there. This scripture, Deuteronomy 24:1, literally spells out that marriages can be dissolved. So now, as we go on, we're going to get into, what the Bible considers this uncleanliness or uncleanness in the woman. And from my understanding, it's the divorce could be based on infidelity. She cheated on him, right? And we'll get into that. But I thought it was just, the wow factor wouldn't even, when I found out and when I read it, I said, oh wow, that's the divorce decree. So God is saying, the Most High is saying that, and all this stuff about, and see, that's why that the wedding vows thing, I kind of did that, because in the wedding vows, people literally take that for better, for worse, literally, and think they should stay with a mate, above anything. And that's just not true. That's not biblical at all. But you can't tell people that people literally take those vows like I said, like God Almighty gave them to us, and he did not. He had nothing to do with those vows, and some of those vows go against his word, and we're going through that. So if there's a decree that God says we can have for divorce, why is it not so for marriage? Because, and we're going to go over the scriptures. There's several different things that happen. Let me first go over like my theory real quick, or what I thought might have constituted marriage in God's eyes. Because in a couple scriptures, sex, it was said that Isaac, and I'm probably bring that up next. Isaac took I think it was Rebekah, to his mother's tent, laid with her, and she became his wife. Well, that scripture and verse infers that by virtue of Isaac having sex with Rebekah, the sex constituted marriage to God, and so she became his wife. That was my theory, right? But that can't be, because, well, we'll go into, let me bring up that wait, before we move on, let's check this out real quick as far as the divorce thing. There's a lot of there's some sectors of religion that, like I said, they take. Let's do Deuteronomy 24:2. It says, and when she is departed out the house, she may go be another man's wife. Right, and saying, if the latter husband hate her, see, and that's why a lot of people don't like King James version, because it has words in it, man, that they separated for Hebrew words. They got as close as they could, and so in English, it's some of it with in a lot of this stuff in the Bible would really throw you off because of the words they separated for Hebrew words that there was no Hebrew words for. Or English words for, or whatever. So however that goes, but that messes with the translation, right? It really does. But it says, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife. After that, she is defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord, and thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God giveth her for an inheritance. So that's where that whole doctrine comes from about, the man not being able to marry the woman he divorced again, and and this and that. This is where it came from. This is the foundation. So if God is telling us that we have to serve, because we have to serve her, because He's give it to her. In today's terms, we call that serving her with the divorce papers. Right, that's basically what he's saying, and boom, she's on her own. She's out the door. You're on your own. You're doing your thing. So, but what it's nowhere near as explicit as that for what the Bible and what God considers, marriage. So let us continue. So Genesis 24:67 says, and Isaac brought her into his to his mother Sarah's tent, and took Rebekah. I mean, he had sex with her, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Now, how that refers to I'm taking her to the tent and all that, I don't know. But either way, so Genesis 24:67 gives the impression that by virtue of Isaac having sex with Rebekah, she becomes his wife, because there's nothing contextually before or after that implies anything else happened other than him and her having sex in his mother's tent. So it's like there was an activity that went on, and sex was the activity that she became his wife. So I'm thinking, okay, for a while I was really thinking, okay, when we lay with the woman in God's eyes, that woman becomes our wife. That's what I was thinking for a long time. That was my theory. But you all will see as we continue along with a couple of the scriptures, that can't be the case, because God in the Bible frowns on what? Fornication, right? So fornication is literally defined as two people having sex, or quote unquote unlawful sex, right, that are not married. That's fornication. So if a man lays with a woman, how can she become his wife if there's no way she can become his wife if God looks at that if you're not married as fornication. So I had to get rid of that theory, because just laying with a woman does not make her a wife. But then we're back to square one. So if just having sex with a woman or a man doesn't make them your husband or your wife, then what is the Bible definition? How does the Bible define marriage? And more importantly, how does fornication fit in with two people having sex that aren't married? Okay, so what constitutes them being married? Is it just saying, hey, I commit myself to this person exclusively in the eyes of God? Or, I mean, there's nothing in the Bible, nothing explicitly that tells us how God defines what marriage is. But it's very explicit that fornication is sin, and two people who aren't married is committing fornication. So there's no way that just by laying or sleeping with someone they become your mate. So let us continue. We're already there. So let's go to John 4:16 through 19. I think this was the Samaritan woman that Yeshua met at the well, and they said, Jesus said unto her, go, call your husband and tell him to come here. And the woman answered and said, I don't have a husband. And Jesus said, I know you did good to say you don't have no husband. See, Jesus told her, you had 5 husbands, and now you living with the man who was not your husband. So you spoke right. And the woman said, sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. So now the question then becomes, this man that she's living with, what about him makes him not her husband as compared to the 5 husbands that Jesus said she had? Right? It doesn't imply that she's not having sex with the man, right? And so he doesn't, Yeshua is not going to, he spoke in parables anyway. He's not going to break anything down, like that. Sometimes he would put stuff out there. You got to figure it out. Right. So the question becomes, what does that man that she's living with, what it is about him? What is it about him that he is not considered her husband, or what did he not do? Because then in another scripture and verse right here, Genesis 29:18-22, we see where Jacob, he basically started working for Laban for Rachel's hand in marriage. He worked for Laban for 7 years for his daughter Rachel. And it says, and Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, it's better that I give her to you, and that I should give her to another man, this with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. So now we're seeing, okay, now he's doing something. He's committing some kind of action. He's working. He worked for 7 years, and then after the 7 years, they seemed unto him but a few days. But he didn't care, because he loved her. That's basically what it's saying. And Jacob said unto Laban, give me my wife. I've done my time. I've done my 7 years, that I may go into her or unto her. And anytime you hear to go unto her, that's the referendum for sex. Go unto her. But after the 7 years, he literally said, give me my wife. So after his 7 years was up, that by virtue of them working for 7 years, that implies that Rachel became his wife by virtue of the act of him working for 7 years. So either way, rather it's the sex, rather it's Jacob working for 6 years, it appears that some type of action is required for the woman to become the man's wife. So let us continue. Exodus 22:16-17, it says, and if a man entices a woman that is not betrothed and lie with her or have sex with her, he shall truly endow her to be his wife. Now let's say again, he shall truly endow her to be his wife. Now again, it's saying endow. Endow, it means to pay something, like whether it's money or back then it was cattle, whatever the case may be. That they consider that an endowment, right? And it said, and if her father refused to give her to him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of virgins. So if a man was to have sex with the virgin, and the father wouldn't let him marry the woman, then he had to pay money according to what I guess the dowry of virgins called for at that time. So now we got three separate things where some type of action is attached to the woman becoming the man's wife, right? So we know just from those couple scriptures and verses that we just went over that is something having to do with either paying some type of endowment to the father, or potentially sex, which we know that's not exclusively true, but potentially that, or working like Jacob did, so there's an action connotation that goes with the woman becoming a man's wife, because there was no marriage license back then, right? We know that. Yes, there were divorces, right? It was a divorce decree because the Most High went over that, but there were no marriage license. A marriage license is a man thing, right? And the Bible tells us in 1 Peter 2:13-14, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, right? Rather to be to the king as supreme, or unto governors as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of them that do well. Now, and the problem with that is because these marriage licenses, that's a man's ordinance, right? And we all know that marriage licenses afford us certain legal rights, right, in our society, right? So that's a man's ordinance. And so First Peter's telling us to submit ourselves to every ordinance of man. But here's the problem. For the children of Israel, we supposed to submit ourselves to the ordinance of the Most High, because our laws, statutes, and commandments are very strict in what we need, what we have to do, what we can do, and what we can't do. So that 1 Peter 2:13-14 could be problematic for a child of Israel, right? Because there's no such thing as a theocracy, right? And I don't think there's ever been one. I'd have to research that. But we live in a so-called democracy, right? So, we know that we have to abide by the laws. We can't kill anybody, or, of course, but, the Most High tells us thou shalt not kill. So that's one of God's laws. That happens to be one of man's ordinances. You can't murder anyone. You can't steal. Right. So it kind of lines up. But then you start talking about other ordinances of man that does not line up with the Most High's laws, statutes, and commandments for the children of Israel. Y'all following me? Right. So that could be problematic for the children of Israel as far as submitting ourselves to every ordinance of man. And I think that's what the Constitution was trying to address when it said that, the separation of church and state and the freedom of religion, all this kind of stuff. I think they did their best to try to, to account for that or whatever, because people have religions. I mean, you could not do things for religious reasons. You could be a conscientious objector for religious reasons. There's all kind of things you can use religion for as a reason for not doing something. And I think that's what they tried to allot for with the Constitution. But yeah, that scripture and verse, generally speaking, could be problematic for the children of Israel. But we understand and know that a marriage license affords us certain legal rights. But I tell people all the time, I mean, listen, a marriage license means nothing if you're not going to stay true to your commitment to one another and the commitment to your quote unquote your wedding vows, right? A piece of paper means nothing without the commitment, because the commitment is the marriage. That's where the marriage comes from, the commitment and the loyalty, right, and the dedication to the respect for your marriage, your institution, in God's eyes. Marriage license don't make the institution. A marriage license just affords you certain legal responsibilities. You don't need a piece of paper. I don't think, this is my personal opinion, I'm getting into my personal, I don't believe you need a piece of paper to be married in the eyes of God. I believe that if you do what you're supposed to do, if you're exclusively committed to a woman, in God's eyes, you're taking care of her, you're giving her, basically you taking care of that. That's an action, right? That's a connotation. That's an action connotation. If you're taking care of her financially, whatever the case may be, and it's just you and her, I believe God honors that. Because, I mean, listen, there's no marriage license in the Bible. So people getting all caught up into this whole marriage license thing, that's cultural. That's societal. That's not biblical. There's nothing in the Bible and then we just went over three or four different things that could constitute marriage in God's eyes, but it's just not explicit. So when we have to kind of just figure it out. So I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. I don't believe. I believe that God honored. God. Marriage is honorable to the Most High, and I don't believe you need. I don't think that piece of paper means anything more or less to the Most High in terms of two people being married. I mean, it does say in society that two people are married, or whatever the case may be. But in the eyes of God, I don't believe that marriage license needs to necessarily be there for him to consider two people, honorably married. Especially if the man and the woman is doing what they're supposed to do, and there's no infidelity, and they're just committed to each other. There's no fornication. They're not having sex with anyone outside of themselves. That's a commitment. That's a straight up commitment to each other in the eyes of God, right? I remember there used to be a saying in the eyes of God and all the angels as witnesses, right? So that's just how I personally feel and think. I mean, I don't. I'm not saying that that's fact. Like I said, we're going to kind of dig into it and just kind of see, because like with Jesus, with the woman at the well, he said, you had 5 husbands, but the man you living with is not your husband. Well, why wasn't he? And what made those 5 her husband, right? Like to see, and we can't. There's no answers for that, because if we had answers for that, I mean, there you go, we'd be all good, right? But anyway, I wanted to kind of just dig into it, give y'all something to think about. I'm glad I uncovered who finally where we got the wedding vows from. So y'all can definitely answer that. People talking about where it came from. Y'all can tell them exactly where it came from and who invented it and what happened to them. Right? That book of the Book of Common Prayer, or whatever it was, 1549. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it's for sale, or maybe it's out on the internet as a PDF. But I tell you, that old English, that's atrocious. But it might be worth kind of getting and looking into, and some of his other works. For him to die the way that he did, I just think that was just so unfair, and that was a travesty. But like I said, may the Most High have mercy on his eternal soul. His intentions were pure with those vows, because people all over the world are still using those vows to this day. So anyway, that's it for this Shabbat. Like I said, give you something to think about, give you some new information, stuff like that. And I hope you all enjoyed it. Have a peaceful rest of your Shabbat. So until next time, this is Dr. Ephraim signing off,
saying Shalom, elect.